Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Spring 2014 seminar series. In this semester, we have 9 speakers. We start with Bo. I'll introduce her in a moment. But we have a series of great talks coming. Leslie Greengard is coming on 14th of February. Valentine's Day, you should be here. Then we have Stratos, Idreus, John Bolen, Raul Jimenez, and 4 more speakers. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they're exciting talks. As you know, it happens almost every second Friday. Our schedule is on the website. If you Google IACS seminars, it comes up first. It's a pleasure today to introduce Bo. Bo works in one of the data science shop. It's one of the exciting new, not so new, but relatively new Chicago-based data science firm that they do a lot of analysis, data analysis. She will explain that, but first let me say a few words. She's been working there since 2012. She has a bachelor's and master's in mathematics and statistics from University of Chicago. And there's something that she has in the abstract that I really like, that she says data scientists often encounter added layers of complexity when the problems to be solved are not well defined and their solutions unclear. This is something that IACS believes a lot, especially some of our classes' homeworks are not well defined on purpose. So Bo is going to talk about the work they do at the Datascope, and especially how things change as the process of design. So without further ado, let's have Bo.
Okay, thanks. Hello. Thanks everybody for coming. It's a pretty big turnout. Thank you, Pavlos and Daniel, for organizing all of this. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. So as Pavlos mentioned, I'm a data scientist at a firm called Datascope Analytics. We're a small company based in Chicago, and our approach to problems is a little bit different. So I'm going to go through that, and for most of the talk, I'm going to go through one of our client projects. So now we do a lot of machine learning algorithms, techniques with natural language processing. We do some topic modeling, and I could talk at length about a lot of those more technical things. But today I want to focus on what I think is a more important issue, especially with our firm, and that's the concept of design. Now, when a lot of people think about design, they think about creativity, they think about the latest pink pants and fashion and things like that, and that is not at all what we're about. Some other people might also think that design is related to experimental design. So if you want to find something out, how do you design an experiment that would prove that something is true or not? And we don't do experiments, so that's also not what this talk is about. What I would like for you all to take away from this talk is that design is a process. It's a process that we use to solve our problems in the face of ambiguity. And ambiguity can mean a lot of different things. In this example client's case, it's when the problem that we want to solve is not very well defined and changes over time. So this is one approach that many people use to solve problems. So you start with the data. You start with the data collection, and that can be from publicly available data sources. It can be scraped from the internet. It can be housed internally in various clients. It can be stored in big banks or the NSA. And the aggregation portion itself and the cleaning and all that can take quite a while. It can take months or sometimes years, really, to get this first step out of the way. After you have the data, you have the problem. So given the constraint that we have this kind of data and this is how it looks, how can we formulate a problem that we can then solve? And for a lot of people, these two steps are interchangeable. Like you might have a hypothesis before the data, but these are far and beyond the first steps. And then once you get removed from that, you think about the analysis part. So what types of algorithms, what types of modeling can you do? And in a lot of firms and a lot of people that do sort of data or any kind of work with data, this is where the biggest legwork comes in. So people really spend a lot of their time on perfecting their algorithm to get from 98% accuracy to 99% accuracy, things like that. And finally would be, after all the analyses are finished, you would work on the interface. And for our work, the interface can be a lot of different things. It can be, what I'm going to show you later, a like interactive tool or web app or something like that, like a dashboard of sorts where you can see the results of the analyses. And for perhaps a lot of people in this room, the end result, the interface, is a report, like a paper. So there are a couple of issues that we have with this kind of linear approach. One, the data that we collect, or the data being the first part of the linear process, it limits the possibilities that you want to work with already. You don't think your problem. When you're defining your problem, when you're doing your analyses, you already think, okay, we only have this data set. We can't do some of the other things. So you're always constrained by that thought. And second of all, the interface comes, or the report or the paper comes last in this process. And that doesn't really work for our clients because we can spend an insane amount of time doing the analyses and perfecting our algorithms, but if we don't go back and look at if we don't go back to the client and ask, hey, is this interface for this analyses results useful to you? And it's not really useful, it can be a problem. So I'm going to go over the design process really quickly and then jump right into the example with the client. At any point, if you have questions, or save them to the end, whatever. So the design process starts with the end user. For us, that would be the client, and for a lot of you guys, it might be the readers of the paper. For our client, you think, okay, you ask them questions. What kind of problems would you like solved? What in your everyday work do you find troubling or difficult? If we have a saying that we like to say, if you had unlimited resources, money, time, and 10,000 monkeys that can do your bidding, what would you want them to do? And so we ask that question, and we have that conversation initially with the end user, and then we brainstorm. So internally, and sometimes with the client as well, we all go up into a room and a bunch of whiteboards and Post-its, and we just come up with a myriad of ideas. Our ideas really sometimes diverge from the problem at hand, but the point at this stage is quantity, not necessarily quality. So from this, then we take our ideas, we curate them, and we build a prototype. And the prototype would be, especially in the first series, in the first time that we make a prototype, it'll be very sketch. It could take a couple of minutes to build out. It might not use our data set at all. And perhaps the most important of the design, part of the design process, is the point that we iterate and iterate and iterate. So once we have the prototype, we go back to the end user and say, what do you think? They might love it, they might hate it, and we go back into this cycle. So that's what the design process is. It's not a linear approach. It's this continuous feedback loop that we're always using. So now I'm going to jump into the example. It actually started really informally. There was our client, her name is Kathy. She came to us and was like, hey guys, I just got promoted. I'm part of a company, which I'll talk a little bit about later. I'm part of a company and I just got promoted. I was overseeing some 2,000 to 5,000 people, but now I'm overseeing 20,000 to 30,000 people. And all these people are within this giant corporation. All these people are in R&D, in engineering departments, and in design. So a lot of the more technical parts of the company, less on the business side. And I would like to know how they are connected. I would like to know, because I'm overseeing them, I want to know what they're good at, what their areas of expertise are, and given an area of expertise, who are these experts, and how they are connected. So as much background as I can give about the client, it's a Fortune 50 international company. They do a lot of R&D. They invest a lot of their resources in that, and they produce widgets. And so in alignment with her promotion, with Kathy's promotion, there was a major restructuring of these groups of people where they were divided into different divisions and sectors in the company, and it was pretty divided, and they combined them all. So the purpose of doing that was the company wanted to increase its interdisciplinary work and increase collaboration from people within what was previously different divisions. And they wanted to see how that could affect productivity and output of the research. So that was essentially what the problem was. She was like, I don't know who most of these people are. I might know their name, but I don't know what they're good at. I don't know who knows who. If you can imagine if your school, if your departments were just erased, and now all of a sudden there's one person that needs to oversee absolutely everybody, and they need to know who's good at what and how they are connected. And your school is not just on one campus, it's all over the globe. So you can imagine how that can be difficult and not really feasible manually. So we took that general hazy problem. She didn't quite know what the solution would look like yet. She just, for now, she just presented this problem without some kind of real vision for what the solution would look like. And so we brainstormed. We brainstormed a lot of things. Notice at this point, we have sort of a hazy idea of a problem, but it's not well defined, and we certainly don't have the data at all. So we talk about, okay, what kind of data sources can we use? And we talk about, if we had these kind of data sources, if we had 10,000 monkeys, what kind of analyses would we run? What would the visuals look like? What would the final solution be? What kind of solutions can we build for this kind of haze of a problem? And so we had a lot of different things. I remember one of the primary things that we wanted to use was email. We wanted to use everybody's internal email correspondence. We wanted to use SMS messages, phone calls, any kind of records, if any kind of public-facing things like Twitter, Facebook, things like that. And given some of these data sources, we came up with a lot of visuals and analytical techniques. Okay, if we had email, how would we extract the text, and how would we get the people, and how would we do this analysis that would make something work? So Kathy took a look at our ideas. He was like, okay, you are never going to get our emails. You are never going to get our SMS. All of that is totally out of bounds, understandably so, you know. So from that divergence of ideas, we eliminated a lot of them. And, but this is what we ended up with, or this is what she promised that we would be able to have. And at this point, she said that we could have this data, and we didn't get it for months. So we have from basically their HR a list of all the people in their in this mega division of 20-something thousand people. So you have the name of the person, some attributes about them like location, you know, country, their function, things like that. Okay. And as well, everybody within the organization, so all the R&D people, engineering within this sphere of people, they are encouraged every couple of weeks to write reports about their work. So these would be like technical reports where they would write, oh, in the past couple of weeks, I've been working on this kind of technical process, and these are the results I found, or you know, things like that. And when they are writing these technical reports, they are also encouraged to work with other people. So co-authorships or more commonly mentions. So it would be a single author, I'm writing about this report, and I mention, special thanks to these and these people. So these were internal technical reports. And finally, they all took, or most of them took a survey as well, asking things, among other questions, things like list the areas of expertise that you yourself are good at, and given these other people that you might know, can you list their areas of expertise? So we also had that data. To make things a little bit more concrete, I'm going to give you an example of what one of these reports were. It would be, a whole page or more of text. And this included not only technical reports, actually, but they have like an internal Q&A forum and message boards. They have newsletters. They came from all different sources. And so this was essentially unstructured text. And from what we extracted from all of these, though, were not only the text, obviously, but the author, the date, and the mentions. So in this case, like Charlie Brown wrote something on January 31st, and it was like, special thanks to Peppermint Patty and Linus. Okay, so from these further conversations and from the promise of the fact that we would eventually get data like this, and we still don't have it, we came up with a statement of work. Now in our field, a project officially starts with a signed statement of work. It's a contract that, we're going to do this work and you give us this money. This is how it works. So in the statement of work, we were able to have 3 sort of slightly more well-defined problems. And spoiler alert, they all change. So the first one was to reveal the areas of expertise. So what is this company good at? What are the things that people are writing about the most? And of those people who are experts in their field, how are they connected? And finally, given that kind of information, how can management, so somebody like Kathy or her bosses, or people high up in the C-level, how can they redirect people or make more connections between experts? Okay, so if you may, I would like to give sort of a visual of how this design process changes. And so this is at the very start, where you have sort of this nebulous idea space. And if you can imagine, these 3 circles are like the 3 project goals. I'm going to talk about the third one first, which was how management can connect people. So this slightly more well-defined problem now is to help Kathy connect people. So a use case would be like, she commonly gets these emails where, Charlie Brown asks Kathy, hey, Kathy, I am an expert in water filters. I'm an expert in water filters, but I don't know anything about plastics. And so can you direct me to an expert in plastics? And so that's one of the primary use cases here. So we took that and we brainstormed, so using the design process now, and we diverged on a whole bunch of different ideas. We had whiteboards and whiteboards. This is just a sampling. And so if you can imagine, from this third idea space, we really diverged on the possibilities that we could have, even given this promise of the type of data that we would generally have. From that, we selected some of the better ideas that we had, and we prototyped. Now, in this first iteration, these were what the prototypes looked like. I'll go into some of them in more detail just after this, but I would first like to point out that these were all ideas that were written down in little Post-its during our brainstorming session, and they are all just sketches. Each of them take like 10 minutes to draw out. There's an idea, and then there's a sketch, and that's it. The purpose of this is, as part of our iteration process, we want Kathy, or we want any client, to be able to honestly tell us, okay, this thing that I like, this thing over here I like, but this really sucks, so don't do this at all. It's much harder for a client after 2 months of coding and making wireframes and perfecting UX design. It's much harder for the client to be like, I know you've worked on this full-time for 2 months, but it is awful. So that's why, especially in the first phases, we really try to make things as quick and dirty as possible. So we drew a bunch of them, and now comes part of the curation process where we're doing research and testing. And in this case, since there's only one end user, research and testing amounted to asking her what she liked. So these are some of the drawings that I was showing in the previous slide. So in trying to look at how people are connected and how she might then connect other people, you can look at the top left, and I'll zoom in here, where it's a graph. And the nodes could be like the people in the organization, and the links would be connections, like, you know, if you two wrote a paper together, or one was mentioned and one was authored, that would be like a connection or something. And then you could focus only, you could highlight certain people if you, for example, only want to highlight subject matter experts in extrusion, then you can do that. So that's what that top left was. The bottom right was also a network diagram, but it was slightly different. It wasn't just, you know, everybody or people related to extrusion. It was focusing more on one person. So the center node would be like some person that you're interested in, and then you could see like the outside, the nodes on the outside would be a whole list of other people. So you would want to see how this person is connected to others, and maybe you want to only focus on the connections made by co-authorships or from that survey that they took. And furthermore, maybe of these people you want to see like a bar graph of, okay, these people, what are they good at? What are the topics there, right? So that was our first comparison. It turns out she hated a lot of this. She was like, this kind of graph thing, this social network thing that people are doing, it's overdone, and given the 20-some thousand people, it's just going to be a hairball. Why? You know, why are you even showing this? And even furthermore, like, she didn't like the graph idea at all. So that's fine, right? Because it was like one Post-it note in the brainstorming session. It was 10 minutes of drawing. It's not a big deal. What she did like was the bar graph. She really liked how you are able to extract from, you know, all these documents. She thought it was amazing that you would be able to not even read all, you know, hundreds of thousands of documents and just extract what the topics are. Notice, however, that is a pretty simple design, like the bar graph, but actually doing it is quite difficult. So we didn't have any idea how to do that yet, but this was an idea that we had. And so we took that. We're like, okay, so you really like this bar graph idea. How about let's make it more complex? Let's add things. Let's add something on the lower right now. Let's add a time dimension. So maybe in this group of people that you're looking at, the topics might change over time. Like some people get better or write more prolifically about certain topics than others. And she was like, that's hard to read. I don't even need that level of detail. So no, I don't want it. So we're like, okay, so we learned something. And this represents essentially the first iteration of our design process where we really diverged on a whole bunch of ideas and we converged on some of the things that that everybody liked. So now comes the next phase. So we take that information, and we did that kind of drawing thing for a lot of different aspects of this solution, and we iterated and iterated. This was our second iteration of what it was. And if you can see here, the bar graph still made it there because she really liked that. So going back to the use case, it would be like or Charlie Brown or Chuck Brown is asking, you know, does anybody have any expertise in this thing? You know, Kathy, can you help me direct? And then you could like maybe paste the email there and search and something would come up. And then you could highlight Chuck Brown and see what he's good at. And this was like further refining, you know, what kind of things that she liked and didn't like. And even now, by the way, we don't have the data set at all. We were given how the data is going to look, but we had no idea how we were going to do this expertise bar graph, no idea how we were going to do the ranking of people or anything like that. And this is what it actually looked like. So I think I'm going to break and then use my IMDb data. So has anyone never heard of IMDb, Internet Movie Database? Okay, that's good. Because I can't show you the exact thing, because I can't show you the exact client thing, I'm going to show you something that we built from, it's hard to see here. Okay, well, so with IMDb, you have a whole bunch of, you have a huge database of movies, and with the movies, you have the directors and the writers, and so in place of, and this is not really a perfect substitution, but the purpose is just to illustrate the point. So we took the movies to be the documents that people wrote, the directors to be the author, and the mentions to be the actors and the writer and the stars. And we took from IMDb, there's like every movie has like a little plot blurb, and we took that to be the paper, and we modeled that. So I think this example was, oh, I erased it. It was one ring to rule them all. Okay? So the asker, okay, I'm just going to do, I can't see this and do it at the same time. Basically, I had queried one ring to rule them all. I was like, who's good at something like that? And so the query search result actually showed ring rule all, because the other ones were stop words. And then you could see, like, in decreasing order, like who is most expert, followed closely in alignment with how often they are mentioned as a level of like respect. So I'm going to go back to the presentation now. Oh, that didn't work at all. Okay, good. Now, basically that was a more straightforward application of the design process and how we took from a nebulous sort of idea space, we converged, or we diverged on a lot of things. We converged on some of the better ideas. We iterated through a series of prototypes, and we produced something that was good for her. And now, the other two problems were a little bit hazier, and it turns out that she, the client, sort of in doing more of this project, she realized that more of it needed to be drilled down on, and so there were some parts of the problem that evolved over time. So that's why we use the design process. The purpose of using the design process as opposed to a more linear approach is so we are able to, so we are amenable to changes in problems or changes in what the client wants, or in case the problem is hazy to begin with. So again, those first two problems were to reveal the areas of expertise, just what are the areas of expertise? But, and this was not in the first original statement of work, how can you reveal the area of expertise and evaluate the connectivity of experts on a grander scale? The previous, the Where's Waldo thing that I showed you, that accomplishes these goals on a more micro level. She wanted to see this kind of thing on a company-wide level. So we brainstormed and we came up with a whole bunch of different ideas. So with the caveat that she wants to see connectivity, but don't use a graph, because she hates that. And we diverged in a lot of ideas, and the more that we talked about this, the more that we realized that it didn't make sense to make 3 different dashboards or 3 different solutions. The areas of expertise and connectivity on a system-wide level, it was more, it was better to just combine them. And so as part of this, we converged the 2 ideas and we started the iteration process. And we have a lot of old diagrams that she hated, and and this was one of the later ones that we came up with. So in evaluating connectivity, we have a sort of a matrix. And so to illustrate this view, I'm going to do a little bit of a toy example. So let's compare countries. So this corporation has researchers in all different countries, and you want to know how well one country collaborates with another country, okay? So from the small scale, again, remember those technical reports. If Alice is the author, and she is from Canada, and Bill is a mention, and he's from Germany, you want to see that connection somehow. So you want to see if, like, if you want to see it in a visual, you can see it sort of like that, as like you're reading from the left up. And you don't want to see that only for one paper, obviously. You want to see that across countries. So you could have something that sort of goes this way and then goes up again. And so it would make most sense if it was something like a grid. And now, to fill that in, we could have just the raw number of documents. So in this case, so Canada, there are 2 documents in which Canada or Canadian was the author, and they mentioned a German. Okay, so now there were a few problems with just listing the numbers here. And don't get me wrong, some people like just seeing raw numbers like that, but Kathy was not one of those people. There were a few problems with this. First, it was not just like a 16-cell thing. It was hundreds and hundreds of cells, and the numbers were quite varied, and it's really impossible just to tell how things are, which squares pop and which squares don't. So we tried to convert this into a color scale. So we could also have just, converted the numbers and binned them, linearly, possibly logarithmically if the distribution was like that. So 1 to 10 documents would be the dark red or, in increasing order. But that also wouldn't quite cut it because that doesn't take into account how many people are in each country. So we needed to normalize in some way. And so we have a color scale, essentially, where we randomize the people and their connections and the number of documents and their distribution. We kept the number of people in each country constant, and we established a null model. And from then, we could tell how one square is doing compared to if everybody was random and everyone wrote documents randomly. Okay, so now you could see squares that easily pop. So the darkest one here is Germany and Germany. So documents in which Germans were the authors and they were mentioning other Germans. So it's clear in this kind of play illustration that they were citing each other a lot. And here, the darkest red, perhaps, is USA to Brazil. So in this example, the Americans are authoring a lot of documents, and they are rarely citing Brazil. Okay, and so this is where that initial play document would come back in, where, here, it's on the pink scale, Canada and Germany, so there are not very many documents that are written by a Canadian and cite or mention a German, but that document is one of them, okay? And so this is what it actually looked like. So now we are able to systematically determine which companies are, or which countries are collaborating with each other, which aren't, but what next, okay? So imagine if one of the results there was that the United States was authoring a bunch of documents and was not citing Brazil. Okay, what now? That square is red. Why? And furthermore, what is Kathy going to do about that? Is she going to send an email to all Americans and all Brazilians being like, you should work together? That's not actionable. It's not realistic. So we took that and we, with that additional bit of information that she wants it from she wanted it from originally to a more individual level, to a more system-wide level, to a more individual level again. So it's back to our design process, our brainstorming, our continual feedback loop and iteration again. And this is something that we came up with where essentially, if you can imagine the country example again, on the left side would be like Canada, and on the right side would be Germany. And here they would follow a series of topics that Canadians and Germans write about. So up top, it looks like they both write about soap, and when they do write about soap, they are working together, like mentioning each other in their papers. But lower down, there would be other things like baby food. So both countries write about baby food, but when they do, they're not collaborating. So that would illustrate an area for opportunity. And we weren't quite sure the exact ways to do this. In fact, this was one of the first diagrams that we showed in response to her "but what next" thing, her "what next" objection. And she was hesitant at first, and so we had a lot of other completely different approaches to solve this problem because she frankly didn't think it was possible. And as part of the tweaking, we had to figure out a lot of things, like what would the heights mean, how would everything fit together, and so that was a lot of iteration. It turns out that kind of diagram that I showed you with the soap and the other topics, that was possible. So we went back in a loop and back to that first illustration. And this is sort of what it looks. This is just completely dummy data, so the topics don't make sense at all. Where the country on the left, CN, and the country on the right, CC, these are the topics that they are writing about. And the length of these gray rectangles corresponds to how much they write about this topic. And the blue band in between them would represent, okay, of the proportion of documents that both countries are writing about, this is the proportion of documents in which they are citing or mentioning each other. As well, the red bands would represent areas of opportunity where both are writing, but they are not working together. Okay, so in this example, you could see, oh, CN, the country CN and the country CC are both writing about Bing Crosby, so second down. That's really interesting, just Bing Crosby. And so you want to know, oh, who in that area is writing about Bing Crosby? Who in CN and who in CC? So you can then click on Bing Crosby, and then it would show up a list of names. So these are the list of people toward the left of one country, CN, writing about Bing Crosby, and vice versa or similarly on the right side. And then you want to know, okay, so who are these people? I don't quite know them. So that's Billy, like who's Billy? You can click on that name, and there would be a personal page, so like a list of what, so his attributes, like his country, function, things like that, and his areas of expertise. And so finally, I'm going to demonstrate for you the stained glass thing. So hopefully this live part works. Where's my mouse? Is that it? Okay. Okay, so it's a little hard to navigate this way, so I'm just going to go through this one, where this is, so IMDb has IMDb votes. You can vote for a movie, and some movies have hundreds of thousands of votes, and some movies have like fewer than 100, and that is a proxy for popularity of the movie. So it's also a proxy for, how big budget or Hollywood the movie is versus how obscure or like, from Sundance, this kind of the movie is. And so from left to right, and also from top to bottom, is increasing popularity of the movie. So it's binned. And so here in this matrix, you could see that, so the left side is, remember, the directors. So the directors of the films are the authors of the paper, and the mentions are the actors and writers, okay? And so you can see on the top left area are movies that are less popular, and they all sort of work together. The directors and actors from mid-tier to more obscure films, they all sort of work together. And similarly with the very popular, like big budget, you know, those kinds of big blockbuster films, they all work together a lot. And then you can see towards the edges, they don't work together as much as you would expect. So toward the bottom left would be directors who generally direct high-level or high-budget films. They don't tend to work with actors who are more obscure. And similarly, with directors who work on the top right now, of directors who work primarily on obscure films, they don't really hire the big-budget actors. So I'm going to try to navigate this. So you can see this bottom here. So this would be the high-budget and very popular directors working a lot with the high-budget and very popular actors. And so you want to see, oh, why is that blue? Like, who's in there? So you can drill down. And these, and the way our topic modeling works, it's not perfect because IMDb just gives them, we base our topic modeling on Wikipedia, and so topics would be Wikipedia pages. And in this case, it would just work out, it just works out that the topics are all the films. So these are some of the major like films and film categories that some of the mostly popular directors and mostly popular actors are working on. So you can see there's like Sherlock Holmes in there, and there's like some other things. Right. Okay. So, and if you don't know, is this Sherlock Holmes? If you don't know who is working in here, you can click on here, and you would be able to see the people who are primarily in this popular like bin, who these people are. And so there's like Robert Downey Jr., Rachel McAdams, and Jude Law, and they're all like associated with this topic. And if you want to know, oh, like who's Jude Law? I don't know this guy. So you can click on him. Oh, and that doesn't work. But basically, you could click on him, and then you would see his areas of expertise and what he's good at, and you know, his attributes, like where he works or things like that. So I'm going to move it back to this. Okay, so that was basically another application of the design process in something that was much hazier and where there were sort of more twists and turns in the problems that we encountered. And there was a lot of, again, thinking from the idea space, diverging in ideas, converging on some of the better ones, iterating through prototypes and going back to the end user and brainstorming and all of that until we finally create tools that are useful for our clients, so everybody's happy in the end. So finally, I'd just like to thank Pavlos and Daniel again. Thanks Dean, who's here, the co-founder of Datascope Analytics, and the entire team and everybody here. So thank you very much.
You described a design process. What about your design principles?
I'm not sure what you mean by design principles. Some of the things, yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Some of the things that we use with this process is, some of the things we use are continually not thinking too highly of our ideas when we brainstorm. It's important to keep as open the mind as possible. And when we do think of something, we're not attached to it. So that's really important. And as part of the iterative process, and especially as part of the brainstorming, we have several principles or rules, you might say, most importantly being to defer judgment. The point, early on especially, is for quantity of ideas and not quality. And so we defer judgments on any kind of ideas, not only because if you were to judge right away, people would be less likely to think up of crazy solutions that just might work. And furthermore, even if somebody throws an idea out there that might not be the best, other people can then jump in and build upon ideas. So it's a very creative work environment, or it's a very collaborative and creative work environment that we have. Yeah.
Kathy didn't seem to know too much about statistics and kind of what's possible in computer science.
Yeah.
That seems kind of annoying. And you, indeed, in the beginning of your presentation, you provided motivation saying, there's this linear process. If we were to do that with Kathy, you'd end up doing this linear process many times, I guess. On the other hand, one might say too that, you're the statistician. You know what's going on.
Yeah.
Maybe it's worthwhile for you to have some principles and say, this is what I'm going to do, and screw you, client.
Yeah, there are. We have been tempted with certain people that we worked with in the past, but that never works out in the long run for us because we try to stay in business. But that's an interesting point. As part of that matrix that I was showing, the stained glass, we had a lot of added functionalities, and for weeks we thought within ourselves, well, this would be great. We could filter for, there is a filter that we ultimately have, but we wanted to filter only for, with the IMDb case, actors in this kind of thing. We want to only filter for mentions in these fields. In addition, we wanted to perform, I guess, more complex analyses to really make sure that the important areas of collaboration and important areas of opportunity popped to her. And we presented a lot of those ideas. And Kathy is not alone in this. A lot of our clients are not well-versed in statistics or algorithms or anything technical at all. While one of our most important parts of our job is to explain something complex in layman's terms, sometimes there is a wide variety of complex algorithms that we can use, and to the lay explanation, they're the same. And so they don't want something more complex. They just want something that they can see. She can understand this matrix. She can see it. She can understand the Where's Waldo list of people there, and she doesn't want anything more complex than that. Yeah, that's a good point, though, that some clients, if they're not well-versed in anything technical, then sort of what's the point, right?
So you presented some specific solutions to specific problems.
Sure.
Have you thought about generalizing this for a class of problems?
Yeah, that's a great point. So the way, I'll talk about this really briefly, the way that we perform topic modeling on our data set. So eventually, when we finally got the data, we had hundreds of thousands of documents to parse. It was unstructured text that we had, and we needed to concisely summarize the topics that they were about. So we used Wikipedia. We downloaded the entire Wikipedia English corpus, and we tokenized words and things like that, and we used that. We made the assumption that if a report is about some topic, that the topic will be a Wikipedia article, and the text in the articles will be more similar than text in other Wikipedia articles. So that was the way that we did topic modeling in this example, and we've actually generalized that, and we've extended that to use in some of our other projects. So yeah, that's definitely something that we think about, because this wiki topic idea that we developed, it took several months to develop and think about and perfect, and it is conceivably very useful for a lot of our other clients' problems as it relates to natural language processing. So we try to generalize as much as possible. Yeah.
What kinds of software tools did you find useful for analyzing the text data? Did you guys use MapReduce or things like that?
Sure. We primarily, and this is no exception, we primarily work in Python, and for the front end JavaScript, the drill down portion, the matrix itself was a new HTML5 thing, and down below the drill in version was D3.js. It's a visualization tool that the New York Times uses a lot for their interactive graphs and things. So there are a lot of tools in Python that we use. For example, the tokenization of words was this package called NLTK, and yeah.
Going off the question about generalizing topics, how often? So usually, because I imagine a lot of people must have pretty similar problems.
Yeah.
So how often do you take maybe for example a product that was used in another project and then maybe tweak it, or do you usually start from scratch the entire time?
Sure, that's a great question. There are a lot of projects where at the base of it, they are very similar. Topic modeling, given a huge corpus of unstructured text, what is that text about? That's a very common problem, not only in our firm, but in a lot of data firms. What we do is we will tell them sort of over the phone, or maybe just totally schematically, this is sort of what's possible, and we've done this to great success, for example, topic modeling. And we will not show them the actual version or the actual dashboard or even the IMDb version. Because, again, that goes back to the principle of being able to throw away ideas. If they see something that is completely well-made and it sort of fits into their problem, but maybe there still need to be tweaks to improve, they are much less likely to be like, oh, I don't really like that, can you just... And they'll just nitpick on ideas and not think more big picture. So we don't... we do like to bring up to them sort of informally or just with a few sketches some common things that we've done in the past successfully, but we don't take projects and then just tweak them and then show them like that. So, yeah.
So you talked about how you developed a lot of sketches and prototypes and
Sure.
using maybe even mock data. I'm curious about how often that process looks fine until you plug in the actual real data and then it has some sort of unappreciated property that kind of breaks things. And more generally,
Yes.
What do you do to kind of prevent? It seems like iteration towards the end of the cycle is more costly. So how do you prevent kind of the late stage iterations undoing a lot of work?
That's a great question. So before we got the data, and this project spanned on the order of a year, and for 6 to 8 months, something like that, we had no data at all. And we had to start building something. So we didn't use the OMDB. We used just the Brown corpus. It's a corpus of articles in the, it's publicly available articles. So we use that, and we, when we develop, we have 2 environments. We have the production environment, which is, the real client data. And then we have our local version. And so we try to make everything the exact same. So we used this Brown corpus and pretended that these were real documents, had real people and the real attributes. That's actually where that dummy stuff with the CN and the CC, that's where that came from. So that we tried to eliminate things like that as much as possible. So absolutely everything about the data sources and the tool are the same, except what the names actually are, what the topics actually are. So yeah, it's very common, actually, that we'll play with some dummy data before we build something real. Yeah.
I was curious about what other kinds of projects you guys work on besides natural language processing.
Sure.
And that same question, if you could answer in each discipline, when you face more problems that have to do with the fact that you designed something that was not appropriate for the actual data set that you're handed eventually by the client?
So the first question was what kind of projects that we do that don't relate to natural language processing. And
yeah, just if you could mention some other kinds of
the projects am I allowed to talk about? We took, so unfortunately I can't even go into the very specifics of this because we're under a tight contract, but there was a, release of some surprise product to millions of people on some interface, and we were able to track. We were able to. Well, I'm going to try. We were able to track how people responded to this surprise product by their behavior, their interaction with this surprise product. And so from then, we analyzed it. I'm sorry. Trying to think of something else. Something else that we also do that often doesn't involve data at all, but just a way of helping people who maybe have a data set, don't necessarily want to use us as their analytics horsepower, but want something else, is we do what we call ideation workshops. And very often, including this project, it's an ideation workshop is when the client comes in, we brainstorm together, and we think of creative and useful ways to use data to help solve whatever kind of problem they might have. And so that is very big picture, just mostly writing on Post-its, whiteboard, that kind of thing. And so an example we did for our nonprofit, whose name I can say, right? The Red Cross of Chicago. They have a variety of data sources, and they didn't really know how to deal with that or how to streamline some of their processes for saving, for rescuing people whose houses have burned down. So we got some of the more, some of the leadership from the Red Cross of Chicago to come over, and we hosted this kind of workshop where we just talked in big picture terms. What kind of data do you have, and how do you want to use it? What is the end goal? And we helped create a proposal for next steps. And they eventually, I don't think they haven't gone with us, but it's a step in the right direction for them. So, yeah.
So you talked about the design process, but once you've done, for example, that the interface is completed, do you have a process to measure the success of that, to see that was Kathy actually did it help the company?
Sure, that's a great question. For this project, not really, is the honest answer. There's no gold standard or benchmark for how well you can really know how people are connected. If we did have a data set to produce that gold standard, we would have used it, like email. So for this, it was really just on Kathy's current knowledge and her conference calls with her and asking her, does this kind of result make sense to you? There are other projects that we've done where we are able to more empirically measure accuracy. So when that's possible, we do, but for some projects like this, the best way that we can do is just to ask the client. Okay, thank you very much.